Over the past 3 years, I've written over 300 pages of content on self-reflections and all things personal growth, mindset, psychology, spirituality, philosophy, anything and everything for the sole purpose of understanding myself on a deeper level and designing a life that feels like an adventure every single day. A life that I would be excited to wake up to each day. Before Michelangelo created the statue of David, it was said that he saw David within the block of marble before he started chipping away. So his job didn't become sculpting David's image, it became removing everything that wasn't David. And I think we live in a world where we are constantly told how to think, who we need to be, who we should be, and we are given this idealized version of ourselves to chase. And we forget that we have the tools to create our own image. And when I realized that the sculptor and the masterpiece are one and the same exact person, I started to find things and ideas that really spoke to my soul. I started to attune to the frequency that resonates with me. And I'm only speaking for myself because my human experience may not be suitable for you, and that's okay. The whole point is to find that out and figure that out yourself. And that comes with understanding yourself past the surface level, past just wants, likes, and dislikes. Like I said, I have 300 plus pages of writings just like this. I've always wanted to turn it into video form, but I just didn't think it would be helpful for anybody because these are my own unhinged thoughts. So for the next 30 days, I'm going to take pieces of my writings and make short videos on them. I don't really know what my goal is for this. I just got a seed of inspiration, and sometimes that's all I need. I have no interest in becoming an influencer or a guru. I'm just trying to be a vessel for my creative energy to flow through. Welcome to my profound ramblings. Your attachments are causing you unnecessary suffering. Welcome to episode 2 of Profound Ramblings. So for background, my family is Buddhist, and while I don't necessarily agree with all the principles of Buddhism, there is some truth to them. For example, one of the 4 noble truths of Buddhism is that desire is the root of all suffering. And if you look at this statement in a vacuum, it is true, because you're pretty much saying that you're going to be unhappy until you get the thing that you desire. But when it comes to life in general, I don't think it's necessarily applicable. I think it's in human nature to desire things, and all of that energy used to resist and subdue desire can be used for other things, like living life. With that being said, I think the reason why desire causes you suffering is because of your attachment to it. A couple of years ago, I tried to build a children's book company, and we had some pretty big wins. I got an opportunity to work with an NBA team, and for months and months, I was chasing this deal, thinking in my mind that if I got this deal, it would be the best thing in the world, and everyone would be happy. And it was the best thing in the world for like 2 days, and once the dopamine wore off, my mind had already moved the goalpost. But that space in between me chasing and wanting this deal and actually getting the deal, it was not a pleasant experience. I was going through a lot of mental turmoil. And then when the deal happened, we were happy, and then it was gone, just as fast as it happened. But I think desires are necessary to live a fulfilling life, full of experiences. If you want a minimalistic, peaceful life, then maybe you could try to get rid of desires altogether. But it is possible to desire something and not be attached to it. Detachment doesn't necessarily mean you don't care. More on that tomorrow. Detachment doesn't mean you don't care or that you've given up. In fact, it's one of the most beneficial things that you can practice. Welcome to episode 3 of Profound Ramblings. Yesterday we talked about how attachments to desires can cause you unnecessary suffering. And a lot of this attachment is centered around an actual outcome. So whether you get the thing you want or not. And when you create this void between what you want and not currently having what you want, you create this space that allows for disappointment, stress, anxiety, and any other negative feelings to enter. When I was building the children's book business, I remember times when I didn't really want to get out of bed because I had no idea whether or not the things I was doing was right or if it was going to work out. And I wasn't really afraid of failing per se. It was more so the stress caused by the anticipation and uncertainty of the outcome. Then I learned how to practice detachment. Detachment to me just means being comfortable with uncertainty. It's knowing that whatever outcome ends up happening, you're going to be okay either way. Because I know all the work that I did leading up to it, whether or not I get the outcome I wanted, is going to point me in the right direction anyway. This doesn't mean that I cared any less or wanted it any less. It was just me taking all the energy that was spent on focusing on the outcome and shifting it to the process and creation. We think we have so much control over outcomes in our lives when the reality is most of the time it's out of our hands. That's just life. And practicing detachment is by no means easy. Even I forget sometimes and I have to catch myself and recalibrate myself. But the very first step is just being aware of what's happening. There are no problems, only situations to be dealt with now or left alone. Welcome to episode 4 of Profound Ramblings. I remember reading this concept in the book The Power of Now, and it had me really confused. Like, what do you mean there's no such thing as problems? But if you think about it, a problem is merely a label that your mind attaches to something. So it's completely subjective. And it kind of goes back to the whole thing where people see challenges, but others see the same challenges as opportunities. But I think at the root of it all, I think it all boils down to control, or at least the illusion of control. Because if you label something as a problem, naturally and logically, there must be a solution to it. So believing that there is a solution to it, it gives you a semblance of control. Because now you think you can fix it, you just have to find the solution first. So what happens when your mind doesn't feel like it's in control? Your mind starts to chatter. It starts to race. It starts to warp your perception. You start developing stress, anxiety, and longing. But that control doesn't even exist in the first place. You really don't have control over a lot of things in life, especially outcomes. They say that we're all just kids walking around in adult bodies, but we're also control freaks too. Letting go of control is extremely difficult. But there's peace on the other side of it. Welcome to episode 5 of Profound Ramblings. We all want to be the captain in our lives and control where things go, how things work, and how things turn out. And we do, to a certain extent. But imagine you're sailing across the ocean. You're like that guy Phoenix who sailed from Oregon to Hawaii with his cat. You're not trying to control the knots of wind behind your sails or how rough the water is that day. You're simply just steering your boat in the right direction and trusting everything else. And it's the same with life. Somehow we think if we have this stranglehold, tight grip on reality, we can somehow influence it. Life is gonna flow forward with or without you. But our mind associates control with safety. In our caveman brain, all it's looking out for is your survival. So when we do lose that sense of control, it leads to stress, anxiety, longing, and any other negative feelings. And your mind will try to influence you to get back that false sense of control just so you can feel safe again. For example, everyone knows that being busy doesn't necessarily mean you're being productive. So what are you actually doing when you're keeping yourself busy and it's not productive? You're just giving yourself a false sense of control, right? And if you're able to let that go and be okay with doing nothing, and be still, you will actually find things that are productive. And when you're okay with stillness and you accept the fact that no matter what happens, you're gonna be fine at the end of the day, your fear of uncertainty will slowly but surely fade away. Most importantly, you'll realize that you don't need to control everything. You can just let things flow. The most important form of control that we have to let go of has to do with others. Welcome to day 6 of Profound Ramblings. Change the scenery today for lighting purposes, and I think this will be the last video on control. We all have people in our lives that we wished or still wish that they would change in some way. From our perspective, it looks and feels like it would be for the better. But when these individuals don't live up to our imaginary expectations, it just causes unnecessary disappointment for us. I used to wish that some of my family members would change the way they think or behaved. But all of that energy is spent trying to justify my points or argue. It's all a waste. The reality is we can't change or control the way people are, and we shouldn't. The origin of change comes from within, and you and I, we're external. So it doesn't make sense for us to want change for a certain person more than they want it for themselves. Looking at my own situation, there are some family members that don't necessarily agree with the choices I've made in life, and that's okay. At first, I didn't really appreciate it, and I wanted to prove them wrong. But me wanting to change their perspective and how they feel about things, it's kind of hypocritical if you think about it. It's no different than them believing that I made the wrong choices. And all of that energy that I spent worrying about that could have been used for me. And the same goes for you. All the energy that you spend trying to or wishing to change someone else, that energy could be used to focus on you. I can't say that the best thing for others is to let them be. I think it varies case by case. But for your own peace of mind, trying to change others is rarely worth the effort. So let go. Accept it. It is what it is. Tomorrow, we'll talk about peace. Peace. Ultimately, I think everyone is chasing some form of peace in their lives. How that peace manifests in idea and image is going to depend on the person. Welcome to episode 7 of Profound Ramblings. Here's the problem. A lot of people think that their peace is locked on the other side of something else or somewhere outside of themselves. And by thinking that, they're actually the ones that are locking themselves away from their own peace. I think we've all been guilty of this, but one of the common ways is when we add conditions to our peace, some if and then statements to the equation. For example, if I get this, then I'll finally feel this. If I make tons of money, then I'll finally feel successful. But does it really end there? We all know that there's always more. So after we've achieved the initial thing, there's always, but if I also get this, then I'll feel this. This is a never-ending feedback loop. Every condition you make on your happiness and peace is like an additional bar on your mental prison cell. And if you actually want to escape and be free, it's really simple. You just have to open the doors to the cell and walk through. Because the door to your mental prison was never locked to begin with. You're the one that's keeping it shut with all of these conditions. Peace is just a feeling. And if it's the feeling you're ultimately after, that feeling comes from within you. And if it's already within you, then you can access it at any time. So when you remove the conditions that you've subconsciously associated to a feeling, it's like taking a hammer and smashing each of the bars one by one. And at the end, you'll realize that you could have just opened the door and walked away free. But if this is all taking place in your mind to begin with, is it better to have peace of mind or peace from mind? There's a hidden addiction that many of us have that we're completely unaware of. This addiction can also get in the way of your peace. Welcome to episode 8 of Profound Ramblings. I first learned about this concept from Dr. Joe Dispenza, and I'm not gonna lie, when I first heard him talk about this, I thought he was absolutely nuts. So here it is. Whether you know it or not, your body is addicted to a certain set of emotions. And these emotions are responsible for maintaining your current identity. It's the reason why a lot of people's identities are fixed by the time they're in their mid-30s. And the reason why they keep feeling the same emotions day after day is because they keep thinking the same thoughts day after day. But most people aren't even aware of this. They kind of let themselves operate on autopilot. So start monitoring your thoughts. What are you thinking about every single day? What are some thoughts you think about that don't serve you? Maybe someone slighted you in your personal life or work and you're still dwelling on it. Maybe you're constantly thinking about how you don't like your current situation and how much better your life could be if this, or this were different. These thoughts are a constant reminder of how much you lack. And when you're in lack, you can't feel whole. And when you can't feel whole, you can't feel at peace. But the problem lies with the habit of continuously thinking these thoughts and feeling the emotions that are associated with them. So if you want to break out of these cycles, you have to be aware of these repetitive thoughts that you're constantly thinking and either let them go or reframe them. We'll talk about that tomorrow. How do you let go of recurring thoughts and emotions that constantly haunt you? Welcome to episode 9 of Profound Ramblings. Yesterday, we talked about how you can get addicted to emotions, and this comes from thinking the same thoughts every single day. So how do you let go of these thoughts so they can stop living rent-free in your head? To preface this, the things I'm going to show you take practice. It's not an instant fix. It's like if a crack addict decides to stop smoking crack one day, doesn't mean his addiction is gone. The urge and cravings will still be there. It's the same with your thoughts. Because you're so used to thinking about these thoughts all the time, your mind is going to want to think about those thoughts and rewind them in your head. So the goal is to be consciously aware when these thoughts come up and slowly separate your emotional association with these thoughts. So the first method I'm going to show you is called the Sedona method. It's grounded in letting go of control and resistance. So if you have a recurring thought that's haunting you, ask yourself these series of questions. I'm going to use a random thought for example purposes. So first, place both your hands on your gut, because your gut is the ultimate decision maker. And ask yourself this: can I let go of thinking I would be happier if my life was different? And answer it, yes. And then make the motion like that, as if you're letting go of tension. When you're first doing this, you might feel some tension in your body. And that's because your body is addicted to the emotions attached to the thought, so it doesn't want to let it go. And the true nature of letting something go means you let go of all judgment of something. So you have to let go of control and resistance related to the thought. So ask yourself, is this a thought that I'm resisting? Can I let go of resisting that thought? Yes. Is this a thought that I'm trying to change? Can I let go of trying to change that thought? Yes. I know this looks weird, especially if it's the first time you're doing this. I felt the same exact way. But if you're able to set aside your judgment and keep an open mind, it can be extremely helpful, because eventually you're going to be able to do this in your head without the physical motions. Personal development is not just some information you read and all of a sudden fixes everything in your life and mind. It's a skill that you have to practice and create a habit out of, just like anything else. And not to get too woo-woo yet, Neville Goddard said it's not what you want that you attract. You attract what you believe is true. So if I were constantly thinking about how I could be happier if my life were different, the universe is going to look at that and say, oh, this person loves thinking about how much happier he could be if his life was different. Let's give him more of that. We'll talk about reframing tomorrow. How do you transform toxic thoughts and emotions that are currently haunting you into ones that actually serve you? Welcome to day 10 of Profound Ramblings. We have to figure out the mechanism on how we're holding on to these thoughts and emotions in the first place. That way we can use the right tool to loosen that emotional grip that it has on us. I might have to separate this topic into multiple videos, but there are essentially 3 separate ways we attach ourselves to toxic thoughts and emotions. 1, suppression and repression. 2, expression. And 3, escape. Let's talk about suppression and repression. Suppression happens on a conscious level. That's when you're actively trying to not think about something. And all that's doing is making you want to think about it even more. Another thing is thoughts are energetic. You can't expect to suppress energy and not expect it to find another way out. It's like a pressure cooker that's slowly building up steam until it explodes out. And when you suppress thoughts and emotions, it might manifest in mood swings, irritability, or just an overwhelming tension in your body. On the flip side, repression happens subconsciously. This is where you completely bury a thought or emotion deep into your subconscious, where you'll actually forget about it. The most common manifestation of repressed thoughts and feelings comes in the form of projection. That's when someone is trying to shift the blame of their own feelings onto you. And usually when you call them out for it, what happens? They deny it, because they genuinely forgot. For suppression and repression, I've found reframing through different perspectives helpful. So in my last business, I tried building a children's book company with 2 of my good friends. As the business went on, I found myself taking on more and more responsibilities to the point where I felt like I was doing all the work. And the stress was physically and mentally killing me. And after we closed the business down, I tried hanging out with those guys, and I still had this feeling of resentment in my gut. And I knew I had to sit down and really look at the situation through different perspectives. It was like putting on different lenses. The first perspective I looked at, I could sit down and blame those guys all day, but we were able to stay friends. You know, people in similar situations hold grudges against each other forever and never speak to each other again. I was at least able to salvage relationships. Second perspective, it could have been a lot worse. We didn't make as much profit as we wanted, but we left that company with money in our pocket instead of a hole in our pocket. Third perspective, the experience allowed me to accomplish a dream of mine, to become a children's book author. And it wouldn't have been possible without everyone involved. And overall, that experience gave me a lot of wisdom, and it played a huge role into shaping me into who I am today. Part 2 tomorrow. Is expressing yourself a good way to let go of negative thoughts and feelings? Not necessarily. Here's why. Welcome to episode 11 of Profound Ramblings. Yesterday, I went over 3 mechanisms people usually use to stay attached to negative thoughts and feelings. And we specifically went over suppression and repression. Today, we're going to go over the second mechanism, expression. Conventional wisdom tells us to express ourselves, and we should, depending on the context. And when it comes to negative feelings, expression usually comes up in the form of projection. In fact, some people use expression to release some pent-up energy surrounding a feeling so they can suppress and repress the rest of it. And mind you, I'm talking about negative feelings and thoughts that we're attached to. I'm not talking about a random negative feeling that was conjured from some event in your life, like someone cutting you off in traffic. In the past, my form of expression was physical activity. So either lifting harder at the gym, going for a run, going for a walk, and all that did was alleviate the symptoms temporarily. It didn't really help me address the core problem. What really helped me address certain thoughts and feelings in the past was just taking responsibility for those feelings and being honest with myself. And this might require you to bruise your ego. I'm not a jealous person by any means, but there were certain emotions and feelings in the past that I was able to let go of because I admitted to being jealous and envious at the time. I just refused to identify with those feelings. Paraphrasing some of Eckhart Tolle's advice, you are not your feelings, you're just the experiencer of those feelings. Another example, if you're feeling a certain way about someone because they did something to you, there's a high chance that feeling is not reciprocated. And it's completely one-sided and you're the only one that's suffering. I had 2 friends that are falling out. One of them is just living life as normal, while the other one has made it a mission to be better than the other friend in life. I guess that's his form of expression. It's like, why? So what if the other guy has gotten further than you in life doing what you want to do? There are 1,000 ways to succeed, and you're just clouding your own path and perspective and making yourself suffer with this imaginary grudge. Another thing that has helped me, which I'll talk about in later videos, is thinking about my future self. For example, is what I'm feeling now and how I'm dealing with this feeling, is that aligned with my future self? Part 3 tomorrow. If you're actively avoiding negative thoughts and feelings, you're giving those thoughts and feelings more power and making it harder for yourself to let go. Welcome to episode 12 of Profound Ramblings. So far we've covered 2 out of 3 mechanisms people usually use to stay attached to negative thoughts and feelings: suppression, repression, expression, and today we're going to cover the very last mechanism, escape. Escape is probably the worst thing you can do if you want to let go. It's like an extreme form of repression. This year, I started solo traveling, and I got the opportunity to spend a month in both Japan and Korea. And in both countries, I met travelers that were traveling because they wanted to get away from life back at home. And look, a change in environment can be therapeutic and can be a solution if the problems are external. If we're talking about letting go, that's internal, and that's going to come with you no matter where you go. And unfortunately, some travelers that I met had expectations that this trip would heal them somehow. And once the dopamine and novelty of being in a new country wore off, they realized that they were feeling the exact same way. And now they're having a bad time thousands of miles away from home, which is unfortunate because both Japan and Korea are freaking awesome. And if you're having thoughts and feelings that are just a little hard to get rid of, no matter what you do, whether you try journaling, reframing, meditating, and nothing seems to work, I found one method that has truly worked for me to get rid of those thoughts and feelings that were taking a heavy toll on my mental that I couldn't get rid of. And just a warning, This is very painful, mentally, not physically. So what you have to do is sit through the fire, metaphorically, and just let the emotions and feelings run their course. Cry if you need to, lower your guard, there's no point in acting tough, and just feel every bit of that experience. Don't resist it. If you're actively avoiding those thoughts and feelings, you're just giving them more power over you. When you stop resisting and really face them and just let them flow, you're taking the power back. This is gonna suck. There's no way around that. But towards the end, you're gonna realize that it's not as big of a deal as you made it to be in your head. And you're gonna feel a heavy weight that's been lifted off your spirit. If you wanna become a better version of yourself, you need to let go of your current self-image. Welcome to episode 13 of Profound Ramblings. Over the past few days, I've been talking about letting go of attachment to desires, toxic thoughts and feelings, but I feel like the most important thing we need to let go of is our attachment to our identity. For most of us, the self-image we carry into adulthood is not one that we created ourselves. It's an image that's been molded and shaped like a ball of clay by the people around us. For example, I grew up in an environment that was not very conducive for building confidence, so I carried a lot of those insecurities and lack of self-worth as a teenager and into my early 20s. It was only about 5 years ago that I really worked on shaping myself into the man that I want to be. And I'm still a work in progress, but I've definitely made quantum leaps in progress. The person you're seeing on camera right now is just a highlight of all the inner work and work I've done behind the scenes over the past few years. So how was I able to take control of the creation process of my own self-image? This is coming from my own experience, but I had to stop caring about what the closest people around me thought about me. It's very unfortunate, but their opinions and beliefs were not aligned with who I wanted to be and the life I wanted to live. Once that happened and I stopped feeling guilty about it, I became the writer and director of my own life movie. And it took a while to see progress out of this because I was stuck with a certain self-image of myself for so long. And for a while, my interactions with people kept reinforcing my old self-image because at the end of the day, people only see you the way you see yourself. One of my favorite anime movies is Your Name, and without going too deep into the plot, it's about a boy and girl named Taki and Mitsuha. And a couple times a month, they switch bodies and they get to live in each other's lives for a day. And I can relate to Taki because Taki was a lot how I used to be. Meanwhile, Mitsuha is a more confident girl who's sure of herself, so when she's living in Taki's body, everyone in Taki's life starts to see him differently because he's carrying himself differently. So if you want to step into a higher version of yourself, you need to let go of your current self-image because there's a chance that your current self-image can't get you to where you want to be. And to do that, you need to act and behave as if you are already your ideal self. This is not some fake it till you'll make it nonsense. This is you learning how to be your future self. Here are some strategies you can use to become a better version of yourself. Welcome to episode 14 of Profound Ramblings. You've probably heard the saying, seeing is believing. Well, the seeing you have to do is with your mind's eye. I'm talking about your imagination. Your nervous system can't tell the difference between what's real and what's imagination. So use that to your advantage. How do you do that? You create a vivid mental movie of your ideal self living in your desired future. And in this mental movie, try to activate as many senses as you can. What are you seeing? What are you smelling? What are you hearing? Tasting? Most importantly, how are you feeling living in the shoes of your future self, someone who has all the traits and accomplishments that you want? It's going to take some practice before you develop this connection and create this feeling of what it's like to be your future self. But personal development is a skill. It's something you need to create a habit out of. After you've played with this and you've created a mental movie that you can visualize regularly, there's one more step. And this step is arguably the most important. Relax, surrender, get out of the way. You don't need to do anything extra or try harder. As long as you can imagine your desired future, feel what it's like to be living in that future, and act as if you are already that person, you can just let everything else unfold for you. This is how you create your intention. And now the universe has your back. This is one of the most important decisions you'll ever make in your life. Welcome to episode 15 of Profound Ramblings. Social media is a funny thing. Some people just contradict themselves on social media for the sake of external validation. I've been guilty of it too, but for some people, if you meet them off social media, they're an entirely different person. I've met people who portray themselves as good people, but they're actually snakes. I've met people who preach family values, but in person they speak of different intentions. Even as simple as people who portray themselves as enjoying their job, but they're actually miserable on the inside. I bring all this up because one of the most important days in your life, arguably the most important day in your life, is the day you start being honest with yourself. It's okay to not want what other people want. It's okay to not think how other people think or even agree with them. And this goes for the closest people around you to the stranger you just met. And I think a lot of people don't know what they want, but I think a lot of people know what they don't want. They're just afraid to admit it. When you commit to being brutally honest with yourself, all the energy you spent maintaining this facade becomes available to you. And it becomes the foundation of your courage to pursue what you actually want. I remember the day I told myself working as a pharmacist wasn't for me. Here's the study book for the licensing exam. It's still in its plastic. I would throw this, but this is a pretty big book and I'm afraid I'm gonna break some shit. So if you feel tension around the things that you're speaking into the world, I would double check yourself to see if you really stand by those things. The universe is not gonna give you what you want. It's gonna give you more of what you are. So if you don't want more of what you currently have, then be honest with yourself. So you've been doing all this work on yourself. How do you know if it's actually working? Welcome to day 16 of Profound Ramblings. When you're working on becoming a better version of yourself, sometimes it's hard to see whether or not you're making progress. And if all you're looking for is the big transformation, then all you'll find is disappointment. Because transformation takes time. You don't have rare candies like in Pokemon to keep leveling up, so you need to keep gaining experience. If you take your focus off the end result and keep your mind open, there are plenty of guiding signs that will show you your progress. The most obvious one is if someone you know tells you that you seem different, but they can't really explain why. And that's cool and all, but you don't need to rely on that. So here's a telltale sign that the personal development work that you're doing is actually working. If you find yourself in a familiar situation, but you handle it differently, that's tremendous progress. For example, if seeing your bills every month gives you anxiety, and now you're not getting as much anxiety over it, that's progress. If someone wronged you and it used to sit with you for an entire day, and now it sits with you for half the time, that's progress. If you find appreciation in little things that you didn't really notice or appreciate before, that's progress. There are signs everywhere. As long as you keep your mind open, you'll find them. Is self-mastery even possible, or is it a complete waste of time? Welcome to episode 17 of Profound Ramblings. I've spent the past 3 years on the pursuit of self-mastery to understand myself on a deeper level, and it's only made me realize one thing. Self-mastery in itself is impossible, and that's because your potential as a human being is limitless, but it's your job to explore the depths of your own potential. Every time I think I've figured myself out, I go out and surprise myself again, or I learn something new about myself. And if I were able to travel to a parallel universe where I could have a conversation with an older version of myself back in college, and I was able to tell that Kevin all the things that I've been able to do and accomplish up until now, I know one thing for certain. That version of myself in college would think the present me is full of shit. Even if I told myself last year about all the traveling adventures I've had this year so far, I would have a hard time believing it. But that's what makes life both exciting and scary, right? You can live a life of wonder, wondering what if you could have done this, that, or the other, or you can go out and explore as much of your potential as possible. The one thing I have learned on this journey so far is that when you do change on the journey, and you will, your priorities may change. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It just means that you're getting closer to the purposes that align with your soul and electrify your spirit. The pursuit of self-mastery is like perfectionism. If you have no attachment to getting 100%, then you can make it pretty far on the journey itself. Realistic goals are bullshit. Welcome to episode 18 of Profound Ramblings. When it comes to setting goals, I think one of the worst things you could do is be realistic. If you want to live an extraordinary life instead of an ordinary life, you have to be a little delusional. And I think everyone should take at least one shot at living an extraordinary life in their lifetime. But here's why I say this. I think the reason why people fail at goal setting to begin with is because they're so fixated on the outcome instead of the actual process. So if you understand that you need to focus more on the process instead of the end result, then a delusional goal serves as a filter for you. For example, if your goal is to make $1 million, there are a lot of ways to get there. If your goal is to make $100 million, there's not as many paths as you can take. And some paths that would make you $1 million wouldn't make you $100 million. So it serves as a natural filter to eliminate things that you shouldn't pursue. I personally don't have net worth goals anymore. I have more lifestyle goals. So one of my goals is to be able to travel anywhere at any time and have it be paid for or profitable. So if that's my goal, then any job that requires me to show up to an office or work a set number of hours is kind of off the table. And I can even narrow this down even more. How can I travel anywhere at any time, making a living doing something I love? Now that even narrows down remote jobs that I should look for, or even businesses that I should think about building. When setting delusional goals, in the beginning you have to accept the fact that you might not achieve the goal itself. And that's totally fine, because on the journey there, you might see a pathway that you would have never thought about taking if you didn't walk down the journey to the delusional goal to begin with. Look at Benny Blanco. He's a well-known producer that has made some of the biggest Billboard hits ever, but his original goal was to be a rapper, not a producer. So on the journey of trying to become a rapper, he fell into producing, when he could have easily just quit and worked somewhere else outside of the music industry like a lot of aspiring artists. So again, a delusional goal will serve as a filter and help you say no to a lot more things. But even then, it's still not the most valuable thing it could give you. The most valuable thing a delusional goal will give you is getting comfortable with the idea of thinking big and believing you are capable of achieving more. More on that in the next video. This is why delusional goals are the best goals. Welcome to episode 19 of Profound Ramblings. Yesterday, I talked about how pursuing a delusional goal will make you more comfortable with thinking big and believing that you are capable of achieving more. But it still won't work without you. You need to give it intention and conviction. And sometimes that means not caring about what the people around you have to say. But it also means that you have to overcome any self-doubt and limiting beliefs as well. When you first create a delusional goal, you might feel some tension in your body, maybe around your gut area. This is a sign that you have some self-doubt that you need to overcome. But the more you sit with your delusional goal, the more comfortable you will become with it over time. And slowly, those limiting beliefs will start to fade if you're able to maintain your conviction and intention. Something important to me is to live a life full of freedoms, choice, location, and time. At first, I had no idea how I was going to achieve this, and all the business people I followed told me that I had to work 80 to 120 hours a week and make all these sacrifices and whatnot, and that was never appealing to me. It's just one path you can take. It's not the only path. You learn some interesting truths when you make the walk yourself. Right now, I have really flexible time and location freedom to the point where I got to cross off my top 2 countries off my bucket list, Japan and Korea, this year. Plus, I got to spend a month in each. Is what I'm doing checking off all the boxes? Not yet. But that doesn't stop me from working on other things, and most importantly, it's given me a version of the thing that I was looking for and once thought was impossible. Like I said previously, it's okay if you don't reach the delusional goal itself. If it's delusional enough and you get halfway, I'd say you got pretty far. Take my boy Rock Lee for example. He wanted to show everyone that you could still be a great ninja without being able to use genjutsu and ninjutsu. And if you're a Rock Lee fan and you follow the Naruto anime, I'd say he got pretty far. Also, one of the most profound and counterintuitive things I've learned while walking down this path is that you need to let go of the how. How you get to where you want to go doesn't exactly need to match what you have originally in mind. More on that in the next video. Is how you get to a goal as important as the goal itself? Welcome to episode 20 of Profound Ramblings. When most people set goals, they're usually after the feeling that comes with the goal and not the actual goal itself. But the problem is most people don't realize this. That's why they always find themselves in a constant cycle of moving the goalpost after a goal is achieved. So if the real goal is an internal feeling that an external goal brings, does it really matter how you get there? Assuming you're trying to do something ethical and legal. I met someone who's trying to be a full-time digital nomad, but the way she wants to get there is by building a personal brand and selling digital products. And I also have a similar lifestyle goal as this girl. Being a full-time digital nomad might not be the most appealing thing to me, but I'm currently living a watered-down version of that. So my suggestion to her was, why don't you find a remote job with your skill set so you can start living the nomad lifestyle now while you build your personal brand, if living the nomad lifestyle is your ultimate goal anyway. Plus, she doesn't know what it's like to work while traveling, so this is a good way for her to dip her toes in the water before committing herself to this lifestyle. Depending on what spiritual school of thought resonates with you, this message will either make total sense to you or make no sense at all. But for me personally, how you get to a specific goal is not really that important. As long as you have the intention and you could put faith into the unknown, you could trust that the universe will bring you to where you need to go, and trust yourself that you'll figure it out. Life works in mysterious ways sometimes. You don't want to close yourself to all the possibilities it has to offer. One of my friends asked me if independence is the most important asset for a man. And it's important, but it's not the most important. Welcome to episode 21 of Profound Ramblings. Let's replace independence with free will and man with human beings. I think your most powerful asset as a human being is your free will. I met a traveler in Korea and we had a short conversation about this. He was basically telling me that he had trouble dealing with depression and was using traveling as a means to help him with it. And I told him that if that's how he wants to use his free will, by all means, go for it. But his response to me was that we don't actually have free will. Our free will is determined by the people we grew up around, what they think about us, and our environment. And I told him that's not free will at all. It's your free will to believe that if that's what you want, but you have the power to choose your response to anything. It might not seem like it in the heat of the moment sometimes, but you do. You just need to pause. Viktor Frankl, in his book Man's Search for Meaning, says the most powerful thing you could do is choosing your attitude. I would add on to that and say you can choose your attitude and your perspective, but that's a part of your free will, so use it wisely. The massive men lead lives of quiet desperation. Henry David Thoreau packs layers of wisdom into this short sentence, and I probably think about this quote way more than I should. Welcome to episode 22 of Profound Ramblings. My ultimate goal in life is a selfish one. I used to feel guilty about it, but now I've gotten past that. My goal is to live a life rich with experiences and be surrounded by people I enjoy being around. In other words, to live a cool life. I'm not trying to save the world, bring world peace, or help millions of people. That stuff just doesn't connect with me. But if I were to help anyone with anything, it'd be to inspire you to fill your life full of as many fulfilling experiences as possible. Going back to Thoreau's quote, I personally believe that this is the main source of worry and anxiety in today's world. Yes, there's worrying about stuff that hasn't happened in the future, uncertainty and all that. But if there's an unlived life within you, a life you want to live but is not currently your reality, you'll always feel tension and dissonance within you. A lot of people try to repress this feeling with present responsibilities and other things. Those responsibilities will always be there for you, but that shouldn't stop you from trying to figure it out. This is something I actually started practicing this year. I've thought about traveling since I was in my 20s. Now, by the end of this year, I should have my top 3 countries crossed off my bucket list, and maybe even more. Who knows? This doesn't need to be traveling for you. As long as it electrifies your spirit and aligns with your soul, you should try to do as much of it as possible. And I know I'd rather have these experiences sooner than later. So what might look like financial irresponsibility to others, they're sound investments to me. You were born to be a creator. The world was meant to be your playground and journal. Welcome to episode 23 of Profound Ramblings. You have the power to create life, create experiences, create value. Everyone has a light that illuminates within them. This light shines the brightest the day that you're born. This light is your unique creative energy. It's the essence of your soul and spirit. So the greatest gift that you could give to the world and to others is to share that light through creation. But unfortunately, everyone is dealt a different hand in life. You're put into this world at random. You don't get to pick the body you're born into. You don't get to pick your family. You don't get to pick the world around you. So it's your purpose to discover your gifts and allow your light to radiate through those gifts. But unfortunately, a lot of the world around us tries to drown out our light. It's like a blanket of darkness threaded together by people who can no longer sense a flicker of their own light. But you have to understand that this is all illusory. They see how bright you shine, and it makes them angry. So they project onto you this ceiling of darkness that looms over their head. But your light, it yearns to follow a path. If you've ever felt a gravitational pull towards anything, that's a good sign. And if you haven't felt this feeling in a while, it just means that you've allowed your own light to dampen. You've allowed the external world to place this imaginary blanket over your light. But when you start to envision an image, again, past the restrictions, past the conditions, past the beliefs and opinions of others, then your world is going to start to brighten up a little more because you're connecting back to your innate power. But the real game begins when you realize that the blanket never existed in the first place. When you realize that, the light inside you is going to beam out like a lighthouse, and it's going to guide you to where you need to be. From there, you have two choices. You can keep doing what you're doing, or you can follow your light and make the world yours. It's up to you. You will be a lot happier if you stop living by expectations. Welcome to episode 24 of Profound Ramblings. An expectation comes with an investment of an attachment, and as we discussed before, attachments can lead to suffering. This is not to say that you shouldn't expect good things to happen for you. You should. I'm talking more about an expectation that a certain outcome is the only outcome for you. More importantly, when you detach from expectations, you protect yourself from others' expectations of you. You'd be surprised. More expectations of you will come more from others than yourself. You just might not be aware of them. For example, I was at a family birthday party recently with all of my immediate family. I have an uncle that I haven't really seen eye to eye with for a lot of my life, but that's another story for another time. And I'm using him as an example to not talk shit about him, but bring up the fact that this is how a lot of people are, unfortunately, and they just might be wearing a mask when they're talking to you. So my aunt and uncle were having a conversation about my uncle's twin daughters, my cousins, and basically without going too deep into the conversation details, my uncle said one of his daughters will do well in life, while the other one will probably grow up to be a very unhappy woman. My cousins are also only in 10th grade, by the way, which makes it more absurd. There's a psychological effect called the Pygmalion effect where positive expectations of others usually lead to positive performances. But there's an inverse of that as well called the Golem effect, where negative expectations of others will lead to negative performances. And the way you can protect yourself from others' expectations of you is to detach from expectations altogether. Again, this doesn't mean you don't care, but positive expectations from others can sometimes lead to unnecessary pressure. I was a weird emo kid in high school with not a lot of aspirations in life, and I'm sure my family didn't have high expectations of me as well. But I think I turned out okay. I'm still a weird emo kid on the inside. I've just been to the gym a few times since then. But just understand that people are always directing energy towards you. Whether it's positive or negative depends on the person, and you might not even know depending on the person, just like the story I just shared. So if you don't protect and direct your own energy, other people will direct it for you. That's another topic for another day. I'm sure you have an adventure or activity that you've been meaning to do. And even if it means spending an uncomfortable amount of money, you should do it. Here's why. Welcome to episode 25 of Profound Ramblings. When I was in Osaka, Japan earlier this year, I was wandering around Kuramon Market trying to find myself some fatty tuna sashimi, or utoro. And I sat down at this restaurant where I met this elderly couple from the UK. We started talking and they told me they were in Osaka for the annual sumo wrestling tournament. And I was like, how did you guys get into sumo wrestling? And apparently during the pandemic, sumo wrestling was airing all over UK TV channels and they fell in love with it. And when it was finally time to say goodbye, I told them, well, it was very nice meeting you guys. Maybe we'll cross paths again next year if you decide to come back." The man told his wife to go pay for the bill, and he kind of paused and waited for her to get out of talking range of us. He lowered his voice a little bit and kind of leaned over to me like he was going to whisper something, and he said, "I can't do these long plane rides anymore. This will probably be my last trip." I hope that doesn't end up being true for them. It's a beautiful thing to discover something you didn't know you were passionate about so much later in life, but it's also sad that you don't get as many moments to experience it as you want. There were times where I questioned myself during that trip. I didn't know whether or not I was doing the right thing. What about saving, investing, and all this other conventional wisdom stuff? But when I thought about interactions I had, just like the one with the couple, and when I felt overwhelming joy from seeing something actually in person and not locked behind a social media post, there was no questioning it. I knew I was doing the right thing for me at least. You only get to experience things for the first time only once, and the maximum enjoyment you get out of that experience only goes down as time passes. That's just fact and life. If you're getting a lot of your motivation from trying to prove people wrong, then you might be steering yourself in the wrong direction. Here's why. Welcome to episode 26 of Profound Ramblings. Dark side motivation, as I like to call it, can work well for short-term goals or temporary goals, but if you're using this as a long-term strategy, you're just destroying your own energy and frequency. When I first decided that I wasn't going to pursue a career in pharmacy right after graduating college, a lot of my family did not like that. And for a while, I just wanted to prove them wrong. And my way of doing that was to make as much money as possible. So all of my goals and ventures reflected that. But all that did in the end was leave me burnt out and a stressed mess. Because at the end of the day, what does proving anyone wrong get me? And I told you so in 5 seconds of feeling right. But as I've said before, a sign of personal growth is if you handle a familiar situation differently. So I was on a cruise earlier this year with some of my family, and we were having breakfast and we got seated at this random table with a random couple. We started talking and the guy asked me what I did for a living. And I said marketing consulting, and he asked me if that was what I studied in college. I said no, I studied pharmacy in college. So as you probably guessed, his follow-up question was, why didn't you start working as a pharmacist? And here's where it gets interesting. My aunt, who was with me, she wasn't talking the entire time, but when this guy asked this question, it's like her ears perked up and she was like, "Yeah, why don't you tell us why you're not working as a pharmacist?" So I told them exactly why. Pharmacy is not for me, and I wanted to see if I could find other things that I was good at and liked, and I had the time to do so. Plus, pharmacy couldn't afford me certain freedoms that I wanted in life. For example, traveling whenever I wanted. I told them the example of my 1-month stay in Japan. I'm sure my aunt wanted this couple to tell me how dumb I was and how wrong I was in my thinking, but to her surprise, they gave me the opposite reaction. Instead, they told me how courageous and cool it was that I was pursuing my own path, and they could relate to it. But I bring this up because I didn't get any satisfaction from this conversation. I wasn't like, "Oh yeah, got you." Even if the couple gave me the reaction my aunt wanted, I wouldn't have cared. Yeah, I would have been annoyed in the heat of the moment because I'm human. But at the end of the day, what do my life choices have to do with them? My younger self might have felt proud at this moment, but I was indifferent. And that's because my motivation now stems from a different, healthier source, which is trying to fill my lifeline with as many fulfilling experiences as possible. Everyone wants to not care about what other people think about them, but sometimes it's hard. So let me give you my perspective on it, on how silly it is. Maybe it'll help. Welcome to episode 27 of Profound Ramblings. First, let me give you this idea to chew on. How other people see you will depend mostly on how you see yourself. Now, how you see yourself is going to be a combination of two things. The feedback that you've collected from people throughout your entire life, plus how you want to see yourself. If your self-image is mostly made from feedback from others, then you're naturally going to care about people's opinion. What you may not know is that you can take control of this self-image creation process and start building your self-image the way you want to see yourself. This next idea will make more sense if you're a Game of Thrones fan. There's a guild within the Game of Thrones world called the Faceless Men. Basically, they're assassins that can shapeshift and change their face to whoever they want at any given point. So get this, how you show up at any moment will depend on your current state and energy. And on the flip side, how someone perceives you will also depend on their own current state and energy. In other words, there's an unlimited combination of impressions that can be made at any moment. So it's very possible for 1,000 different people to have 1,000 different impressions of you. With that being said, imagine if you go to someone you trusted for advice about something, and they tell you a different thing every single day. Would you continue to trust this person's advice? Would you even value it at all? That's basically what other people's opinions are. But what can be consistent 1,000 times out of 1,000 is your own self-image of yourself. What is cool though is when the new self-image you created for yourself is validated by other people. You still shouldn't put too much weight on it, but sometimes it's hard to see progress. So you should take signs of this as that your inner work is working. If you can understand this concept, you'll never need to search for love, happiness, or peace ever again. Welcome to episode 28 of Profound Ramblings. My all-time favorite quote comes from the legendary samurai Miyamoto Musashi. The full quote goes, "There is nothing outside of yourself that can ever enable you to be stronger, richer, faster, better, or quicker. Everything is within, everything exists, seek nothing outside of yourself." Everything is within. That 3-word sentence encompasses the entire quote, and if you're able to reflect on this deeply, you'll find that it's the answer to a lot of life's problems. One day I'll get it tattooed somewhere, but for now, I'll just unpack my understanding of this idea to you. The real payoff of acquiring or accomplishing anything is the feeling that comes with it, or in reality, the feeling that you think is going to come with it, but it's not always as it seems. Which brings us back to everything is within. Those feelings already exist inside of you. If you're seeking love, the idea that love exists somewhere outside of you will probably lead you on a tiring chase to try to fill that void. But if you understand that love already exists within you, the first person you'll start to love is yourself. And when you don't need to search for love anymore, you can start giving it away without any expectation of return because you're overflowing with it. Plus, there's nothing to pour from an empty cup. And don't be surprised if the law of reciprocity starts to work in your favor. All the love that you give out will be returned to you, probably in greater quantity. The same goes for happiness. I'll get into that in the next video, but once you understand that these feelings are learned and not earned, life will be more fun for you. This is the most important lesson on happiness that I know. Welcome to episode 29 of Profound Ramblings. Growing up, we were conditioned to believe that we have to earn everything. And yes, there are a lot of things in life that we have to earn, but somewhere along the lines, we started associating this idea towards feelings like happiness. This leads many of us to believe that happiness exists somewhere outside of ourselves, and suddenly we are under the illusion that happiness is tied to external desires. If this were true, there would be no happy farmers and no unhappy wealthy people. I haven't met a lot of farmers in my life, but I've met plenty of people with money who are miserable. And that's because happiness is learned, not earned. You don't need to earn something you already have. On a high level, it's really just a choice. You can choose to be happy or not. It's the same concept as whether you believe you can or can't, you're right. But first you have to uninstall the programming that happiness is something you have to earn, and replace that with you're happy just because you want to be. So when I was going through this and I was learning this, I realized that I had multiple layers of programming that I had to remove. First, it was learning that accomplishing things or acquiring things didn't really give me true happiness, and if it did, it was only short-lived or temporary. Second, I had to detach my accomplishments and possessions from my self-worth, because until I got what I was seeking, I was making myself believe that I was unworthy to be happy. And this taught me something very important. Happiness is not just a feeling, it's a state of being. And if we're talking in the realm of attraction and magnetism, there's nothing more powerful than your state of being. More on that tomorrow. Here are the most important lessons I know about manifestation and attraction. Welcome to episode 30 of Profound Ramblings. Today marks the very last day of my 30-day rambling challenge that I set for myself, so let's get a little woo-woo. We are all energetic beings, and that is the foundation for attraction. You operate at a certain frequency depending on your consciousness level and your thoughts. Your consciousness level is associated with different emotional states. Lower consciousness levels are tied to emotions like anger, apathy, fear, grief. Higher consciousness levels are associated to emotions like joy, gratitude, love, acceptance, etc. Look up David Hawkins' Map of Consciousness if you want to do more research into that. but you attract based on the frequency that you're vibrating at. And that's why the universe won't necessarily give you what you want, it'll give you what you are, or what you believe to be true. If you think you're a failure in life and you continue to operate at low consciousness levels, well, guess what? Everything you attract in your life is probably going to reinforce that state. This is also why a lot of paradoxical things happen. Have you ever wanted something to not happen so badly that you thought about it a lot and it ended up happening anyway? That's because you're consumed by that low frequency of fear that you actually attracted that bad event into your life. What about wishing and praying for something good to happen and it doesn't happen? Well, think about it. If you knew something was 100% gonna happen, would you spend any time wishing and praying for it? All the wishing and praying is usually just a mask for self-doubt and fear. So that's the real frequency that's attracting, or repelling in this case, that good event to not happen. Because the thing you're wishing for probably exists at a higher frequency level. That's why Neville Goddard talks about the law of assumption. Assuming the desire that you want has already happened and is going to happen for you. I do an exercise called priming every single morning before I start my day. Look up Tony Robbins priming on YouTube if you want to follow along with that. But one of the steps in priming is imagining 3 goals that you have in mind, and imagine that you've already achieved it and start living in that state. All that exercise is doing is helping you operate at the frequency you need to be at to attract that thing into your life. And that ties back to my previous video of everything is within. The feeling of accomplishing or acquiring your desire already lives inside you, and you can summon it with pure imagination. And to end this rambling, if you can take a page from Joe Dispenza's wisdom, and you could be grateful for an event that hasn't happened yet, that's when things start to get a little interesting. And if you look out for it, you'll start to see some changes in your life.